move in as early as late Friday there into South Florida, coming up into the central part of the state Saturday morning and through the middle of the day on Saturday, and then moving into northern Florida late in the day on Saturday. Again, you've got a very large, exceptionally powerful storm with the winds now really coming up. Look at that, St. Thomas now gusting to 85 miles per hour, and the core of the storm now coming into the British Virgin Islands right in there. There's a look at the waves right now, getting up as high as 19 feet near that center, and that wave action taking aim on northern parts of Puerto Rico, along with surge of 4 to 6 feet for the northern part of the island, and again as high as 15 to 20 feet Turks and Caicos, as well as the southern part of the Bahamas. Well, we want to get out to Mike Seidel. He's been in Florida following the preps there, Mike, and this could be one of the worst storms that we've ever seen there in Florida.
Yeah, we'll see. We're on edge. Everybody's on edge down here. We've got Dr. Dave Nolan, who's the department chair and also the professor of atmospheric science here at the University of Miami, the Rosenstiel Atmospheric and Marine School of Atmospheric Science. A lot to say there. Okay, let's talk about the model, the track, and the turn, because you had a lot of thoughts on that earlier.
Well, I just wanted people to know that even though many of the models, which are all available on the internet now, everybody can go on the line and see what the models are doing. Even though many of those have shifted offshore, people will notice that the Hurricane Center track has not gone all the way and still comes over Florida. And that's for good reason, because the models tend to shift back and forth more than what actually ends up happening. So the Hurricane Center is conservative, and they do that because that actually ends up being a better, more accurate forecast. The Hurricane Center forecast is more accurate than any one model. It's even more accurate than all the models combined. So I hope that people will pay attention, but will not overreact to the idea that the hurricane may miss Florida.
And also, remember, we have the cone for good reason, because the average track error at 5 days, which is the last point on the cone, is about 225 nautical miles. So thus, the width and breadth of the cone.
Right, and actually the four-day error is about 170 miles. That's still very large. So the four-day position is very close to Miami now. It could be 170 miles to the right. It could be 170 miles to the left. Everybody is still at risk, so I hope everybody just still keeps preparing in a rational way.
Well, we're hoping for an earlier turn. I guess it's all dependent on what happens upstream in the continental United States.
Right, and it also depends on very small changes in how the hurricane moves right now. So it's moving past Puerto Rico right now. If it stays closer to Puerto Rico, it will probably end up closer to Miami. If it travels farther north from Puerto Rico, right, and it also depends on very small changes, and what it's doing now will turn into large changes later on.
Okay, Dr. Dave Nolan, as always, we appreciate your expertise. Out here just off Key Biscayne, keeping an eye on the situation here in Miami. Folks are scrambling. They're buying water. There are gas lines. Schools are closed for the rest of the week after today. We'll have more on the track. We'll get more analysis and more from the aftermath in the Lesser Antilles next.
This program brought to you by the UPS Store.
came yesterday to get some things. They were out of water, they were out of bread, but I think that they've restocked. So we've been able to get what I needed, but it's definitely supplies are limited.
Now it's time to prepare, and we know that one city in Florida is absolutely taking this storm very seriously, and that is Key West, Florida. We want to bring in the mayor of Key West, Craig Cates. Sir, thank you so much for taking time with us. We've heard about some of the evacuation orders already underway. What can you tell us about the preparation status right now?
Yeah, we're evacuating the tourists right now, and we started that first thing this morning. And then we'll start evacuating the residents tomorrow. But people have heeded the warning, and they've been boarding up their houses and their businesses, and a lot of them have left already. So that's worked out very well, because we know one road in and one road out here. Once everybody tries to evacuate at one time, traffic could back up, and could be other issues for that.
All right, Mayor, and as you said, there's one road in and one road out. What's your message to residents who may decide to ignore the evacuation order?
Well, this storm is so powerful that this is the most people I've ever seen evacuate down there in the Keys. They're taking it very serious, and maybe coming on the heels of the damage in Houston. Probably got people very nervous too, but they're heeding the warnings, they're evacuating early, and the city is preparing all our resources down here, where we have the staff to manage it, and we're letting everybody else evacuate as early as they want.
And so this is sort of a tough question. I'll put it out that right now. Anyone who may be leaving Key West, perhaps into South Florida, may find themselves in difficulty there as well, because of course South Florida also could be under the gun. What are the recommendations here? How far are we suggesting some of these folks go in order to evacuate?
Well, obviously, anybody that's driving out in their car can go as far as they want, and they understand that. Our concern is that the ones that we will be busing out to our shelter in Miami, where the storm may be coming into Miami. So that's got some serious concerns for us, and we've been discussing it, and we will continue. So at some point, we may stop asking people to evacuate and stay here, because this may be a safer spot. So we're following the weather reports very closely and making decisions as they come along.
And Mayor, again, a lot of uncertainty as far as exactly where the eye goes. But if the case were to be over the Keys, the Keys are an island, not like the mainland of Florida. A surge and wind going to be the biggest impact. So if people get stuck on the islands, are there going to be shelters and places above where the surge could potentially go for them to go to?
No, we don't have shelters in Key West, because being on the island, we ask everybody to evacuate. Obviously, we got some strong buildings and some churches that people could end up going to if they have to, but everybody understands that, and they are evacuating. But as you mentioned before, we're at the end of the chain, and what if the roads get damaged further up in South Miami or in the Upper Keys, and then we can't get any supplies here either. So even if we don't get damage here, we might not be able to get any supplies for a long period of time. So that's a serious concern down here.
And of course, I know a lot of people are thinking about what about after and
Yep.
getting home after. Well, Mayor Cates of Key West, thank you so much for taking time with us. We'll continue to check in with you, and of course talk about the information coming out of the Keys and how people can really get ahead of this storm.
Yeah, so let's go straight into where we have those hurricane warnings. That's here in the Turks and Caicos, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, also the northern end of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then watches for the southeastern Bahamas and Cuba. And again, watch meaning we're talking 36, 48 hours out in advance.
All right, and that doesn't mean that they're going to stop there. It's just that, again, it's a time period thing. But these are spots where you still have time to prepare, make preparations, but that window of opportunity is closing. With that said, we know fully well there are going to be impacts beyond these places. So even places like South and Central Georgia into South Carolina, North Carolina really need to pay attention.
Yeah, don't regard this storm completely. We'll have more when we return.
Places like South and Central Georgia into South Carolina.
Yeah, don't regard this storm completely. Weather Channel. We're going to take you live out to St. Thomas under an extreme wind warning with gusting winds upwards of 79 plus miles per hour right now.
And this is a look via EarthCam, and as we've seen in spots through the storm where you have this view and then the winds pick up and then take out the camera. So while we have this view, you know, you can see, you can get an idea of the conditions and in some cases how they're getting much worse in other spots. But again, this is in St. Thomas.
And granted, the storm hasn't even yet made its worst pass yet for the island yet, so likely going to get worse. Well, Puerto Rico bracing for Hurricane Irma as powerful hurricane approaches the island.
NBC's Morgan Radford has the latest from San Juan.
We just saw one of those outer bands come through, and we've already seen significant changes here in Puerto Rico throughout the day. You can see these winds picking up. They're bending the palm trees. The shoreline has already risen about 2 or 3 feet. And as people are hunkering down, preparing for what could be the harshest portion of this storm coming in later today, they are, one, stocking up on those last-minute non-perishables. Secondly, those emergency shelters, 456 of them across the island, are now beginning to fill up. Entire families are coming in saying, look, we need food, we need water, we need backup generators, and we need protection. Finally, some people are just stranded here. Even those who wanted to evacuate can't. About 150 flights have since been canceled, just coming in and out of San Juan alone. We'll keep you posted throughout the day, but in the meantime, the National Guard and FEMA say their #1 priority today is going to be saving lives. Back to you.
Morgan Radford in San Juan for us. Thank you so much.
All right, and again, as she mentioned, she's in San Juan, and we're going to bring in Carl now with the latest as what you think Hurricane Irma and its impacts with Puerto Rico is going to be.
Well, it's a tough call because it depends on how close that core gets to Puerto Rico. We know the northern part of Puerto Rico is going to be hit with hurricane force winds. We're going to go, first of all, to Miami-Dade County and get an update on the preparations there.
Irma. Please note that all the information will be available on our website, www.miamidade.gov, and due to a high amount of web traffic, our site experienced some difficulty in loading Tuesday evening. We increased capacity on our website, and it's functioning once again, and we have added critical information to our homepage. 311 hours will be extended again tonight until 9 o'clock. Please be patient. The call volume is heavy. Callers are experiencing wait times, and we encourage residents to also submit inquiries via the 311 Direct app, which can be downloaded in the App Store. Regarding the services that we provide to residents, as I said yesterday, Miami-Dade County water is safe to drink. Open the tap. Use containers in your home to store tap water. I've seen a lot of reports in the news media about stores running out of bottled water. There is nothing wrong with Miami-Dade County water. Open it. In the old days, we used to store them in pots and pans and all. So if you find that you can't find bottled water, just store some water. Miami-Dade County, it's good enough to, believe me, it's good enough to drink, okay? Department of Solid Waste Management, waste and recycling services will continue until wind speed reaches 35 miles an hour. Once again, I want to urge all our residents not to trim their trees or hedges or begin any major cleanup projects at this time. Now is not the time. And although our crews will continue to collect bulky waste, collect garbage and bulky waste, our scheduling has been suspended. That means in Miami-Dade County, you have to schedule a bulky waste pickup. We have suspended all of those additional new ones as of 8 o'clock this morning, and we will continue to collect the piles that were previously scheduled and routed. If you live in a municipality, check with your city regarding waste pickup. Different municipalities have different systems, some of which will be picking up bulky waste, I believe, until Friday. If residents need to immediately dispose of household trash, yard trash, and bulky items, please take it to your trash, to one of the 13 trash and recycling centers in Miami-Dade County. Open daily, and we will have extended operating hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. effective today until Friday, September the 8th. Curbside garbage and recycling services will continue throughout the remainder of the week as normal until weather conditions no longer permit safe operations of our vehicles. Miami-Dade Transit services, Metro Bus, Metro Rail, and Metro Mover will continue to operate until sustained wind speeds reach 35 miles an hour. Miami International Airport in Port Miami, Miami International Airport will remain open. Flights can continue to take off and land until sustained winds reach 35 miles an hour. Please remember that our airport and our seaport, they are not shelters. Beginning Friday at noon, all commercial vessels, including cruise and cargo, will depart our port, and we will close Port Miami beginning at 8 a.m. on Saturday. Passengers who have questions regarding their flights and cruises should contact the airline and cruise line directly. Parks and libraries will close effective tomorrow. marinas are contacting our residents directly. We're asking the boat owners to secure their boats. Building and permitting offices are closing tomorrow as well. We do have staff heading out into the field for inspections to ensure that structures such as roofs and other infrastructure are secure. All drawbridges will eventually be locked, but that is something that's controlled by the U.S. Coast Guard, and the lockdown usually doesn't happen until the threat gets close, and we don't expect that to happen until Friday or Saturday. Miami-Dade Police Fire Rescue are preparing for Hurricane Irma. Please do not call 911 for general questions. Use 311 instead, and use 911 only for an emergency. For their own safety, visitors in our community are encouraged to cut their vacation short and leave Miami-Dade County as soon as possible. I'm also hearing a lot of people saying they plan on leaving town, our own residents. If you're planning to do so, my advice is to leave early. We don't want you to be caught in a hurricane in your car. That's the worst thing you could do. So if you are planning to do so and leaving by car, please do so, as soon as you can. Lastly, 45 members of the Urban Search and Rescue Task Force that were in Houston are returning today at 5 o'clock, and we will be welcoming them. These are the updates. As you probably have figured, I have not issued a mandatory evacuation order for zones A and B, and that's because the storm has slowed down a little bit. We now have a little bit more time to assess if we're going to need mandatory evacuation orders, and so the storm slowing down give us a little bit more time to take a look at forecast track and a little bit better indication of where the storm is actually going to go. So, but we do have and will have 4 shelters with a capacity of about 8,000 people. They will be open today for those that want to voluntarily evacuate from zones A and B. So now those are my remarks in English, and I want to make some remarks in Spanish. Buenos días, gracias a todos los residentes del condado de Miami que se están preparando para este huracán, que es un huracán, uno de los huracanes más grandes y más poderosos.
All right, Miami-Dade officials there saying that if you are planning to leave Miami-Dade County, you should do it sooner rather than later because they don't want you to get caught on the roads. A lot of concern about traffic leading up into the northern part of the state and other parts of the southeast. And we've got a new advisory on the storm right now from the National Hurricane Center. Not much change. We're still looking at an exceptionally dangerous storm, one of the strongest we have ever seen in the Atlantic Basin, 185-mile-per-hour wind, Category 5. Pressure is up just a little bit, 922 millibars up from 918. There is an inverse relationship between the pressure and the wind, so we may see the winds responding, coming down just a bit. But this is such a dangerous storm as it is. Even a slight change in the wind speed does not change how incredibly dangerous the storm is, and it's coming now into the British Virgin Islands and moving towards the U.S. Virgin Islands as we speak. Looking at the forecast track and intensities from the Hurricane Center, it may pass just to the north of Puerto Rico. It's going to be a very close call. Could directly impact the Turks and Caicos as well as the Bahamas, and also here into northern Cuba. And then eventually, as it moves towards Florida, it may be a Category 4 storm at that time. Now, the best guess right now is that it does head towards South Florida. The reason why the cone is so wide here at days 4 and 5 is because of the forecast track errors, which average 225 miles on day 5. That's why the cone expands the way that it does. And we're seeing something similar in the model guidance right now. The models are trying to figure out exactly when the storm is going to make this turn to the north. There are still some ensemble members that show the storm remaining offshore altogether, but there are not very many of them. So it appears that the storm is going to have a direct impact somewhere. The question is just how bad is it going to be? How bad is it going to be in Florida? Will that core of the storm remain offshore? If that happens, it could be worse for the Carolinas. Will it move right onshore, in which case we could be talking about a devastating impact there in South Florida, or perhaps into the western part of the state. And some of the model guidance now shifting a little back towards the west. So still a lot of unanswered questions about the track of the storm, but it is a very, very dangerous storm. And if you're thinking about getting out of town, as they say, you may want to do that sooner rather than later. So here's a look at where it is right now. And this is what a monster looks like on the visible satellite imagery. You see that very well-defined eye now coming into the British Virgin Islands right in there. Here is St. John, and then here is St. Thomas off to the west. In both of those areas, there's now an extreme wind warning for winds of greater than 115 miles per hour. That's the standard for the extreme wind warning. They could be much stronger than that. In fact, they could be as high as 150 miles per hour. And you see where that eye wall is right now. That is now just about ready to come into the U.S. Virgin Islands, now moving across the British Virgin Islands. Exceptionally high winds here, and the impact is going to be devastating in these areas. And let's go out to Mike Seidel. He's now in South Florida reporting on the preparations there. And Mike, we're hoping that we're spared some of the worst impacts of this storm, but there is a strong possibility that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, we're just waiting and watching as you are to see when this monster makes a turn. The sooner the better. Meanwhile, here we're at the Rosenstiel School of Atmospheric Science and Marine Biology, not microbiology, out here in Virginia Key. That's Key Biscayne over there. That's a very vulnerable area, and certainly Zone A if the mayor does issue mandatory evacuations. But he did say in the press conference moments ago that they're going to hold off for now on Zones A and B. Meanwhile, you can see the employees here are getting storm preps underway. They're taking down the tarp, which serves as a roof here at the restaurant at the University of Miami, getting this down. They've not taken this down in a long time. In fact, I was told the one that was here for Wilma got ripped away. So they've dodged a lot of storms, a lot of close calls. Remember, Matthew last year didn't cause much problems here in Miami-Dade County. Look at what they're doing though around South Florida. Gas lines at the grocery, Publix, wherever you go. You may be able to get what you need, but then there's the line to check out to the back of the store. Water has been in tight supply. They're bringing more water in, and everybody's just gearing up. They saw what happened with Harvey. This is a whole different animal, a much stronger hurricane as far as wind goes and potential impacts through a wider area, larger area, because of the width and breadth of the wind field. We'll have more on the track. Again, the next update comes in from the National Hurricane Center just before 2 p.m. Eastern Time. More on that and the latest aftermath pictures coming in next.
We have the congressional leaders here with us today, and we have a lot to discuss, including the fact that there's a new and seems to be record-breaking hurricane heading right toward Florida and Puerto Rico and other places. We'll see what happens. We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
And that was President Trump commenting on what we're following here, and that is Hurricane Irma, still bringing dangerous wind and rain and storm surge to the Caribbean as it pushes towards the U.S. mainland. Meanwhile, people in Texas still working to repair their lives after Hurricane Harvey.
American Red Cross Vice President of Disaster Operations Brad Kaiserman is in Fairfax, Virginia with a look at how the Red Cross is handling both disasters. And Brad, for those in the path of Hurricane Irma, what are the preparedness steps people should be taking now to be safe?
Chris, thanks. First of all, look, we've still got rivers out of their banks in Texas, and now we've got a hurricane the size of the state of Ohio moving across the Caribbean and pointing towards the East Coast. So folks really need to take preparation seriously. First of all, follow the plans of local government. Follow the plans of the direction of your government officials, and if they tell you to evacuate, go immediately. Have a plan. You should be packing now, making sure you're ready to go if you need to move. Make sure you know how you're going to communicate. Get your chargers, your cell phones, make sure you have some extra water, some food. I tell you, I've got this app. I use the Weather Channel app, the Red Cross app, the FEMA app, and they tell you what to do exactly, right beforehand. So folks should get an app, and they should follow those instructions, but absolutely, when officials tell you to evacuate, go. Don't wait.
And Brad, it seems like a daunting, kind of mind-boggling task, but the Red Cross, you're able to prepare for Hurricane Irma and at the same time help people recover from Hurricane Harvey?
Thank goodness for the generosity of our donors and the American people and the folks who volunteer. We've got 4,000 people on the ground in Texas helping folks recover from Hurricane Harvey. There were 16,000 people in shelters in Texas last night. And meanwhile, we're moving enough resources for 100,000 shelter residents into position now in Florida, and we're also moving resources for North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. Given the ambiguity of this track, we've got to be ready for all of it. So, yes, we are able to handle ops on two fronts here, and we're also prepared to send additional resources to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Looks like they're going to take a beating.
And Brad, again, obviously we had so much help and support with Harvey. If people want to help the Red Cross, how can they donate?
Really appreciate if folks could go to redcross.org and they can donate there. That's also where you can find out where shelters open. If you need help, you can call 1-800-RED-CROSS. And I would just encourage folks, whatever charity you can donate to, whether it's volunteering your time, giving of money, giving blood, all of the volunteer organizations active in disasters are working hard in all of these places to help people. So please, find a charity that meets your needs. Go to 1-800-RED-CROSS, dial redcross.org, all of those things. You can help people who really, really need your help.
And Brad, we have about 30 seconds or so. We don't want to forget about the folks who are just hurt still from
all of
Harvey.
those things. You can help people.
What are the needs there right now that maybe perhaps we can remind people at home that that's what you guys need to do your job?
Absolutely. 16,000 people in shelter, 85,000 displaced. We're feeding well over 100,000 meals a day with our partners, the Baptist and Salvation Army. Folks, we're making sure that folks have comfort kits, hygiene items, and long-term housing is really going to be an issue. So right now, it's getting folks out of shelters and into safe, secure housing, working with our partners at FEMA to do that, and working with our partners in the state to do that as well.
All right, Brad Kaiserman with the Red Cross, thank you so much for your time and working hard from Harvey and now Hurricane Irma.
Absolutely, and the hurricaners are in the storm, flying around, gathering data and finding the latest as far as the storm goes. The latest updates as of 11 a.m. this morning, 185 miles per hour, Category 5, continuing to barrel through the British and U.S. Virgin Islands on its constructive course towards the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, and possibly Florida.
only as much gas as you need. You don't need to fill your tank to the brim to inland. I mean, if you're only going to stay close to your county. All ports are open and operating to bring fuel and supplies in. Evacuations. Right now, there are mandatory evacuations order in effect for all the visitors in the Florida Keys. Tonight, this order will go into effect for all residents. If you're told to evacuate, get out quickly. We can expect additional evacuations as the storm continues as it gets near our state. Everyone must listen to their local officials. As you know, individuals with special needs are starting to be evacuated in Miami, and Miami-Dade officials are advising residents living in low-lying areas to start evacuating today. I cannot stress this enough. Do not ignore evacuation orders. Remember, we can rebuild your home, we cannot rebuild your life. Real-time traffic information and evacuation routes is available at www.fl511.com. And in my direction, all tolls have been waived across the entire state on all Florida roadways. This should help families evacuate quickly and safely. We are preparing for Irma to directly impact our state, and while it's still too early to tell exactly where the storm will hit, it is incredibly important that all Floridians keep a close eye on this incredibly dangerous storm. Do not sit and wait for this storm to come. It is extremely dangerous and deadly and will cause devastation. Get prepared now. The National Guard. I just activated an additional 900 members of the Florida National Guard. By the end of the day, there will be a total of 1,000 Guard members to immediately begin assisting with ongoing Hurricane Irma preparations. The Florida National Guard are incredibly important to executing emergency preparedness and response action across the state, and I will continue to activate more members as needed. These members will be in place to help with evacuations and sheltering, as well as the coordination of search and rescue with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. National Guard members will also be assisting utility companies following the storm as they respond to return power to homes and businesses. I've directed the remaining 6,000 available members of Florida National Guard to report for duty no later than Friday morning. In addition, 13 helicopters and more than 1,000 tactical high water vehicles are on standby. The Florida National Guard is coordinating with other states and the National Guard Bureau to ensure approximately 30,000 troops, 4,000 trucks, 100 helicopters, and air evacuation crews are ready to support our state. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is preparing search and rescue teams for potential deployment. The Fish and Wildlife Commission has more than 200 officers standing by for the first wave of response based on potential storm impacts. 30 teams with supporting resources such as trucks, coastal and river patrol boats, an ATV, and 2 shallow draft boats are prepared for evacuation support, search and rescue missions, or any additional needs. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FWC, the Department of Highway and Safety, and other partnering agencies are identifying resources for deployment and response. The Florida Highway Patrol is monitoring road and traffic conditions to ensure roadways are clear. Each FDLE region has established a minimum of 2 response teams and logistics planning team ready to deploy to impacted areas. Utility providers. I've been in constant contact with Florida's utility providers, and they're already working on staging and asset allocation so they can return power as quickly as possible following the storm. They're actively pre-positioning resources throughout the state and in neighboring states. We know from previous storms how incredibly important it is for power to be restored as quickly as possible. I will be talking to the utilities often throughout the day, and I've urged county and city officials, including sheriffs and police chiefs, to reach out to their utility providers so we can all work together in response to Irma. Lake Okeechobee. Water levels in Lake Okeechobee are being lowered as well as the surrounding canals. Routine inspections of the Hubert Dike are taking place, and additional inspections will begin once the lake approaches 17 feet. The lake level is currently 13.68 feet. Based on current rainfall forecasts at this time, we have no major concerns with the dike, but we will remain in constant contact with the South Florida Water Management District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to monitor the dike. Shelters. If you are evacuating from the Keys, you can shelter at Florida International University. We're working hand in hand with the counties to ensure that shelters are available for other communities who may need to evacuate. There is absolutely no reason for anyone not to evacuate if you are ordered to do so. Shelters will be available, and you should follow the directions of local officials to go to the shelter that fits your needs. Families can go to www.floridadisaster.org/info to learn where shelters are in your area. Comcast will be opening more than 137 free Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the state for individuals in need, including non-Comcast customers. For a map of these hotspots, visit www.xfinity.com/WIFI. The state is staging supplies such as meals, shelter support trailers, and water at the State Logistics Resource Center in Central Florida for deployment as needed. We will be positioning these goods once we have a better understanding of the path of the storm. Last night I spoke to U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, who told me that HHS has disaster medical assistance teams en route to Florida. These rapid response teams aid in the provision of medical care to those who need it after the storm. We've also seen reports on the news of grocery stores being out of water. Retailers are working as quickly as possible to fill grocery store shelves with water and other emergency resources. All weight and driver restrictions have been waived and tolls are waived, so this is helping. We've been in touch with retailers and more supplies are clearly on the way. If you visited the store yesterday and found a shortage, you should go back today to get your supplies once everything has been replenished. What we need now is volunteers. We need more volunteers. I encourage all Floridians that can volunteer to do so to help prepare and respond to this storm. Volunteer Florida has 43 community response emergency response teams on standby to deploy to areas of need. American Red Cross teams are arriving in Orlando for staging with 26 tractor trailers at the State Logistics Resource Center, 150 trailers at the State Farmers Market, and 100 emergency response vehicles staged in North Florida. The Red Cross is also sending 1,000 volunteers to Florida. The Salvation Army is on standby with 32 cooking units in Florida, and additional supplies staged and awaiting deployment in neighboring states. The Florida Baptist Convention has 35 kitchens on standby, ready to feed 35,000 meals a day. Floridians can go to www.volunteerflorida.org to sign up for volunteer opportunities. Volunteers make a huge difference in these emergencies and help with shelter, food distribution, and response efforts. Your efforts can make the difference a family needs to get through this storm. So please volunteer. Regarding school closures, to find out if your local school district is closing, please visit the Florida Department of Education website at www.fldoe.org or call your superintendent. State offices in Monroe County are closed today until further notice. State office closures in all other counties will follow the direction of county officials and will be announced as they are determined. I've directed state offices in all 67 counties to be closed on Friday. Every family needs to have a plan. Have a disaster preparedness kit and be ready today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of how to create a personalized plan, visit www.floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of how to create a personalized plan, visit www.floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of how to create a personalized plan, visit www.floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of how to create a personalized plan, visit www.floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of how to create a personalized plan, visit www.floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now. For details of
We've spoken directly to Brock Long.
Disaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now.
We've spoken directly to Brock Long.
Disaster.org/get-a-plan today. Do not sit and wait. Prepare right now.
We've spoken the Commandant directly to Brock Long. The Florida and Katrina. We're operating on separate things without coordination.
To Brock Long.
The Commandant directly to operating on separate things without coordination.
To Brock Long.
The Commandant directly to operating on separate things without coordination.
To Brock Long.
The Commandant. Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive without any breach to the integrity of the dike. And everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. First of all, Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive I said this earlier, there's without any breach to the integrity of the dike. Experience and everything that's been said here today. Lake Okeechobee is at a point where it can receive
what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation. Again, some of the things he mentioned. Take action now. Don't wait till Sunday. Just what Florida is doing in preparation.
Good afternoon from Miami. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel with our continuing round-the-clock coverage of Hurricane Irma. And here at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School, they are doing a little prepping here, taking down the awning, getting it out of harm's way as we await the impacts here. Really, the impacts not moving in here until Saturday and Saturday night. Let's bring in Brian McNaughty, who is a senior research associate here at the Rosenstiel School at the University of Miami. And let's get your thoughts on the track. I mean, that's the $500,000 question. When's it going to turn and where's it going to end up?
Yeah, hi Mike. This is certainly a question that everyone has: is when will the north turn happen? All of the models agree on a north turn happening sometime this weekend, as it comes west-northwest, passing by Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba. Then the question becomes: at what point does it turn north, and is it well east of Florida, over the east coast of Florida, up the spine of Florida, or even over the west coast of Florida? And this many days out, we simply can't tell.
And we're all anxiously awaiting the 12Z, the 8 a.m. Eastern run of the European, which will be in the next hour or so.
Right. The latest run of the GFS model, which is the U.S. version of that, still has it coming up very, very close to the east coast of Florida.
Yeah, it shifted at a hair west, which makes a big difference when you're talking about the eye wall onshore or just offshore. We saw that with Matthew last year.
Right, yeah. What's important, I think, is a storm rating, when you hear a Category 5 or Category 4, that only refers to the peak winds in the eye wall. And the eye wall is this skinny ring around the clear eye that has those peak winds in it, and the winds drop off outside of that. So it really does matter if the eye wall stays offshore or where it hits. So that's a huge concern.
Yeah, if it stays offshore and buzzes up the east coast, we're still going to have impacts, surge and erosion and some wind damage, but it really lowers the overall impact.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, there's no doubt that Florida will have a severe impact from Hurricane Irma. There's no way around that now. The question is how severe.
Okay, Brian McNulty, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
He's right here at the Rosenstiel School. What a view out here. This is Virginia Cut. Behind us that's Key Biscayne. And again, we heard the mayor earlier from Miami-Dade County say they're going to hold off on issuing mandatory evacuations for now. But more than likely, some announcement coming up, if not later today, tomorrow morning. This would be Zone A. Zone A and B are the ones they're looking at this point. Those are the ones prone to surge and coastal flooding. Maria and Chris, back to you from sunny Miami. A lot of anxious folks down here, as you can imagine. A lot of people on edge. And you can see that in the gas lines and at the grocery stores.
And that's what they should be taking those preparations now. Very sunny elsewhere in the country. Of course, Irma going to be the big focus going into the weekend, but for the rest of the country, we're actually shaping up very nicely.
Yeah, we want to just take a second to get that weekend in view. Not to mention, too, with the wildfires going on, seeing a lot of pictures of the hazy skies, too, the Pacific Northwest especially. But when you're talking about the rest of, say, the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, cool, a little taste of fall wouldn't be an extreme statement, right? 70 degrees especially. But when you're talking about the rest of, say, the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, cool.
Keep in mind, fall hasn't even officially started yet.
Right, and always a good reminder, too, we're focusing a lot on Florida and Irma for very good reason, but we want to highlight the impacts potential here for South Carolina, North Carolina, 2 states, including Georgia, too, that need to really monitor the storm.
This program brought to you by Crest. Healthy, beautiful smiles for life.
People ask me all the time, should I evacuate? What will happen if I don't evacuate? As the mayor said, if you live east on Federal Highway or east of Federal Highway, you want to evacuate. This storm will have significant impact to South Florida. We're not knocking on doors, we're not arresting people, and we're not pulling people out of their homes. We're asking you to leave so you don't become a victim.
And those are wise words there from the sheriff of Broward County. You heard what he said. East of Federal Highway, you want to evacuate.
Oh my goodness, and some strong wording as well, saying that this is to help you save your life and that of your families as well. We're watching what's happening and unfolding right now. We're getting video in as the storm affected areas, including St. John and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And here on the periphery, some of the outside effects, still gusty winds and turned up water.
Yeah, definitely going to take a battering here from Hurricane Irma. And for the latest on Irma, we're going to send it over to Carl Parker as to what the latest on the storm is.
Just a devastating impact in the islands this morning that's now coming into the U.S. Virgin Islands. Winds of 150 plus miles per hour across the U.S. Virgin Islands here for the next few hours. This is still a Category 5 storm with winds of 185 miles per hour, one of the strongest storms we have ever seen in the Atlantic Basin, and moving towards the west-northwest now at 16 miles per hour. The core of the storm may be passing just to the north of Puerto Rico later today, then to the north of Hispaniola most likely. Direct impacts are likely in the Turks and Caicos and southern part of the Bahamas, and then after that it becomes very difficult. We know it's going to take a turn to the north, but where exactly that occurs remains to be seen. The best guess right now is that it takes aim on South Florida, but you see the largeness of the cone here related to the forecast track errors, which are as large as 225 miles at 5 days. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, and there's a very small chance that the storm could take the right-hand side of this and then remain offshore, but it's very small right now. It appears that it's either going to directly impact Florida or pass just to the east, in which case it would directly impact the Carolinas. And the reason why this forecast is so difficult is because the players are not even in place yet. When we look at the water vapor imagery here, we're following this upper low, which is now coming down across the northern plains. They're actually going to be putting up extra weather balloons today to get a better picture of what's going on with the atmosphere there. And then here you see the model forecast showing you that upper low, which is likely going to turn this thing off to the north. But when that occurs remains to be seen. That's why this forecast is so challenging, and it is possible that the storm comes right up and along the coast and then moves up the coast, which is something similar to what we saw with Hurricane Matthew last year. And we just hope that that is not going to be the case. This is the visible satellite picture, and we got a terrible hit this morning in the northern Leeward Islands, and right now an extreme wind warning in effect for the U.S. Virgin Islands, for St. John and St. Thomas. 115 mile per hour winds expected there. In fact, they could be well above that. 130, 140 miles per hour is possible. There's a flash flood warning also in effect here. This is St. John right in there, and this ring is the eye wall. That's the very most dangerous part of the storm, and we've been seeing velocities on radar of 160 to 170 miles per hour aloft. And so this is why we say 130, 140 mile per hour wind entirely possible, as that ring is now coming into St. John and will be coming into St. Thomas in just the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. So we're expecting to see winds of 150 plus miles per hour in gusts now and through the afternoon there in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then beyond that, we see that there was a little more of a westward component to the motion earlier on. Now it appears to be solidly west-northwest. So it appears that the storm is on track to stay to the north of Puerto Rico, but it's going to be very, very close. Right now what we're thinking in San Juan is Category 1 winds, but they could be much stronger than that if that southern part of the eye wall does manage to get into Puerto Rico. Storm surge way up there, no doubt about that. We're looking at 15 to 20 feet in the Turks and Caicos, and the elevations there are quite low, oftentimes 6 to 10 feet across those islands, so that certainly is of great concern to us. And if all that wasn't enough, there's a tropical storm behind this one, and this tropical storm could have an impact on the Leeward Islands coming up this weekend, possibly as a Category 2 storm. Awful lot going on in the tropics right now. We're going to continue our coverage of Hurricane Irma coming up in just a moment here. Stay tuned for our in-depth coverage.
storm surge and extreme winds are the biggest concern right now. The storm is bigger, faster, and stronger than Hurricane Andrew. We are being very aggressive in our preparation for this storm, and every Floridian should take this seriously and be aggressive to protect their family.
Hello and welcome to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. I'm meteorologist Nick Walker.
And I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. The state of Florida under a state of emergency now at this hour. State and local agencies are urging people to take the storm very seriously. We want to take a live look in San Juan, Puerto Rico. This is where Irma is already impacting the island. They've got strong winds, and you can see the shaking going on the camera there where a hurricane warning is in place, thanks to EarthCam for that picture. In Florida, you see on the right there, long lines at the grocery stores as people are buying up water and perishable items ahead of the storm's arrival.
Here's the latest now on the forecast cone of what we can anticipate seeing Irma to do as it moves perhaps to the north of Puerto Rico, or at least the center moving northward. Obviously, Puerto Rico is going to get slammed with winds and waves anyway. And then moving up into the Bahamas and then taking a turn toward the north, perhaps right over the Florida Peninsula.
We want to get a look at the big picture at this monster storm now. Hurricane expert Dr. Erica Navarro is with us now. Erica, what's the latest?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. We are watching this storm now, the Eyewall Square over St. Thomas here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Right now, we've got a wind gust reported of 105 miles per hour in St. Thomas with sustained winds near 55 miles an hour. So the impacts there are for sure starting to be felt across a lot of these places, and they will be moving off to Puerto Rico this afternoon and through this evening. Taking a look right now at the radar imagery, you can see those wind gusts. There's the eye of Hurricane Irma here over the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's moving off to the west, and it's just starting to show signs of that possible northward turn, which is great news for Puerto Rico because that means that eye wall may stay just offshore, which would absolutely be great news here. We're seeing wind gusts at the San Juan International Airport near 40 miles per hour, 36 being measured there. A little bit further west, you can see there wind gusts up to 40 miles an hour, but the impacts are beginning with those outer bands coming on shore. We've got an extreme wind warning up in effect here for St. John and St. Thomas. These warnings are only issued for Category 3 or higher winds, so this showing you the extreme winds that are moving into this area. This is only the third time that we've seen this product issued, the other two times being with Hurricane Harvey and with Hurricane Matthew last year. And these winds truly are screaming up into this area because you can see here, that's the very strong dipole, those two areas, that's the circulation around the center, that eye right there, right over the U.S. Virgin Islands. And their winds are being estimated on the radar near 160 miles per hour, and they could even be higher than that. This is just the radar estimate, and it's now within 100 miles of its approach to Puerto Rico. So this storm is absolutely devastating. It is very strong, and it will be moving off in this direction throughout the day. So let's go ahead and time this out here. This is this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Here's the center of Irma making its approach very close to the island here, the northern part of Puerto Rico. And again, this is just one model's depiction. The center may just slide to the north here, which would keep the strongest of the winds offshore, which would certainly be great news. However, regardless, looking through the evening time tonight, we are still going to have strong onshore winds here on the northern part of the island, regardless of where that center goes. And that's going to be bringing very heavy rainfall, a strong storm surge, as well as a tropical tornado threat here for the northern part of the island. So we cannot rule out any of those impacts in any way throughout the evening time today. And then Irma will be sliding off to the north and to the west by late this evening, and then by tomorrow morning. Taking a look at the wind field here, the strongest winds are going to be felt near the center, near the eye wall. Those hurricane force winds, those are winds in excess of 74 miles per hour, are likely only felt over a distance of 60 to 70 miles. Notice here the lighter color of purple, that's the tropical storm force wind field. This is a very big storm. It's very wide. It's nearly 400 miles across. So those tropical storm force winds extend well outside of the center. So we will be feeling impacts across the entire island of Puerto Rico and across many of the islands after that, including the Hispaniola here and off towards the Bahamas. So Jackie, we are anticipating anticipating many threats here. 8 to 12 inches of rain, likely in some places. In Puerto Rico, we could be seeing up to 15, and then the impacts will continue beyond that.
They will. And so Florida's getting ready for it for sure. Here's a live look for you out of Fort Lauderdale, where Hurricane Irma is expected to be closing in on the area this weekend. Sandbags are now being distributed on a first-come, first-served basis at Mills Pond Park. Residents are responsible for filling those bags and carrying them out on your own. By the way, mandatory evacuation expected to be put into play tomorrow in the Fort Lauderdale area east of Federal Highway, as well as in the low-lying areas and mobile home park. So getting ready for Irma's arrival, which is just massive here on the satellite imagery. In fact, it's so amazing to me how large this eye is too. Look at that, British Virgin Islands really inside the entire eye at this time. So let's talk about the impact and the timing of all of this. Erica was just talking about Puerto Rico. What comes next is going to be Hispaniola, then up towards the Bahamas, and the first onset of tropical storm force winds into the Florida Keys and in South Florida could be as early as Friday evening, so you have that amount of time to rush all of your preparations to completion. Such a powerful, intense storm. This is in the top of the record books in terms of most intense wind speeds, and now we've seen these 185 mile per hour winds for more than 24 hours, making it the longest, strongest storm on record. Nick?
I want to put a little perspective now on this wind, because the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale goes, as you know, between a Category 1 and a Category 5 hurricane. And a lot of folks, may be saying, I've experienced a Category 1, even a 2 being 96 miles per hour to 110 miles per hour, but a Category 5 is 157 or more, and of course, we are well within that with Hurricane Irma. But let me show you what it compares to as far as the strength is concerned. It's not just, a Category 2 is not just twice as strong as a Category 1. Category 5 is not just 5 times as strong as a Category 1. It's actually 500 times. So much of the area hit by a Category 5 is going to be uninhabitable for weeks or months to come. Well, Justin Michaels is live in Florida ahead of Irma's arrival. Justin.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, lots of activity here at this Home Depot in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Take a look right now. You can see rows and rows of people getting anything they can, batteries, plywood, generators. It's tough to get around here. The Weather Channel comes back after this.
have new video in now. This from St. John. Look at the trees just taking a buffeting from these winds, and the ocean waves really kicking up as well. This is what we can expect to see over much of the islands, and perhaps even greater than this, because, you know, the person obviously out taking this had to get inside eventually.
Absolutely. They're under that extreme wind warning right now in St. John's. Just incredible. Irma just lashing the U.S. and British Virgin Islands right now. Fort Lauderdale residents are also bracing for the impact of Irma down the line. That's where we find our reporter, Justin Michaels. And Justin, how seriously are people taking this storm?
Quite seriously, Leon, as a matter of fact. In fact, this Home Depot has been packed every moment we've been here today. Things like generators, batteries, sand to make sandbags, plywood to go over your windows. These are all things that as soon as they show up on shipments, they sell out. Let's talk to Fort Lauderdale resident Stephen Reed. Stephen, you say you lived here for 16 years. You've been through a couple hurricanes, different tropical storms. How does this one compare so far as the preparation goes?
Well, I have never seen anything quite so serious. I'm going through the city, and I can see everybody is just going insane here. I'm looking at the city now myself also, and trying to imagine how it is now as opposed to how it will be in a few days. Hopefully not as bad as I think.
As you're watching the forecasts on the Weather Channel, are you? How do you feel personally? Are you concerned?
I'm very, very concerned, yes. I just want everybody to be safe, and I hope everybody takes care of one another. Yes, very concerned.
All right, very good. And what are you doing personally to prepare?
I am securing up all my projectiles. I'm helping my neighbors board up their homes, and I'm taking care of the pets and anything else I can think of. Anybody that needs help, I will help them.
All right, very good. Stephen Reed, thank you very much for your time. Be safe, heed the warnings. Thank you so much, very much. So again, Stephen, just one of countless people doing everything they can right now to not just help themselves, but also help their neighbors. He's working with his neighbors right now too, and we're hearing that by a lot of people around here. So what's happening right now here in Fort Lauderdale? Well, schools are closed on Thursday and Friday. Government buildings are closed on Thursday and Friday. We do know some parts of Fort Lauderdale are under a mandatory evacuation right now, not the entire place, but some parts, and we have spoken with a few people who know that that's going to be happening tomorrow. Their evacuation goes into place tomorrow. So they're questioning whether or not they're going to heed those warnings. Of course, the best thing you can do if you're under an evacuation notice is to heed the warning. Because don't think about yourselves, think about the people who have to come in and save you afterwards, right? So lots of activity here. You can see behind me, lots of people, but also remember plywood, sand, things like that completely gone. Batteries almost completely sold out. Grocery stores like Publix are going to be getting all sorts of different things in. Shipments come in, Nick, but as soon as they show up, everything leaves again. So it's almost a timing thing. You have to be here at the right place at the right time to get the things you need. Dire situation, but people seem to be taking it seriously. Into you.
It really is. Thank you so much, Justin. And yes, you do need to take this seriously. And a few tips for you here as we prepare. You need to secure loose items. You heard Justin's guest talk about him doing that. And then, once the hurricane is bearing down upon you and you need to avoid traveling at that point, prepare for power outages. They could be long-term, weeks, maybe even months. Then, you need to take shelter and stay out of the water. Stay away from the water and continue to monitor the situation. Make sure you've got fresh batteries for that portable radio and the NOAA weather radio there so you can get by and get through this storm. You need to have plenty of water for everybody in the family, plenty of non-perishable food, a 7-day supply of medicine. You may not be able to get that medicine very soon at all after the hurricane comes through. And know your evacuation plan. Know when you are ordered to evacuate and obey authorities. And please keep out of harm's way. We'll get you through this. Stay tuned to the Weather Channel as we continue.
You can just hear the power of the storm. Hurricane Irma roared onto the island of Anguilla earlier today. You can see and hear the ferocity of the winds here, bending those trees nearly in half.
That's what Category 5 winds look like, and right now the storm remains a Category 5 hurricane, packing winds of up to 185 miles per hour. Irma expected to hit Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic in the next 24 hours.
So here's a live look at the latest satellite imagery as Irma continues to batter into the British and U.S. Virgin Islands right now. There's the current wind speeds. The pressure has come up a little bit, but not enough to really make any significant changes here.
You know, it's still way down there, 920 millibars. This is one monster storm. And you know, for over a decade, the first response team has been assisting storm survivors hit hard by the worst imaginable weather.
But sometimes founder Tad Agolia and his team need some help of their own.
As Hurricane Harvey slammed into Rockport, Texas with wind gusts topping 140 miles per hour, Daryl and Carolyn James rode out the storm at home.
Of course, we were scared, you know, but sit around and say a few prayers.
Good Lord, please let me wake up in the morning. Yeah, really scary.
Carolyn's chronic lung disease made evacuating a challenge. Clearing up her home without help will be impossible.
I can't do anything anymore. I could barely walk to my bathroom without gasping for air.
Fortunately, the Ram Nation of volunteers partnered with the first response team to make a difference in this devastated town.
We need Ram Nation volunteers to be there right away for people who need a helping hand.
This is what America's all about. For these folks to come together like this, and the outpouring of support has been humbling and overwhelming.
Dozens of Ram truck owners arrived at the Jameses' home ready and eager to work.
We all seem to come together when, times of need like this.
Whatever it takes to get done, helping out any way I can, shape or form, I'm here to help.
As trees and debris were removed, bins of supplies were handed out to neighbors in need.
We do appreciate the people that's here working and volunteering. It's awesome the way that people are responding.
In just a few hours, the Ram Nation of volunteers and the first response team had cleared the Jameses' property, giving the family a welcome boost.
To have people come in like that and to do the work for folks that you couldn't ask for a nicer situation.
And take that story and multiply it by about 1,000 times, and you still have the ongoing recovery in Texas due to Hurricane Harvey. We still have so many river gauges that are well above flood stage, some of them, 15 of them in fact, currently in major flood stage and numerous in moderate flood stage. So this is an ongoing story back into Texas as people try to recover from the flooding. And the flooding still remains here along the Brazos River in Richmond, Texas. The record crest was 54.7, and it crested just a little bit, about 2 feet below that. Also, near record crests here around Beaumont with the Neches River, crested at 7.83 feet, the record being 9. It's down to around 7 feet now, and another river that is still in major flood stage is the Sabine River. They're in Orange, Texas. The latest observation at 7.07 feet, cresting at almost 8 feet. Well, Hurricane Irma is already impacting the islands in the Atlantic, as we've seen. Officials warn this could be one of the worst natural disasters to hit the Caribbean. We'll have the latest on on where Irma is going to be headed next.
Responding by storm, powered by Ram trucks. Guts, glory, Ram.
People ask me all the time, should I evacuate? What will happen if I don't evacuate? As the mayor said, if you live east on Federal Highway or east of Federal Highway, you want to evacuate. This storm will have significant impact to South Florida. We're not knocking on doors, we're not arresting people, and we're not pulling people out of their homes. We're asking you to leave so you don't become a victim.
Broward County Sheriff there talking about evacuations that are expected to go into effect starting tomorrow east of Federal Highway. We're talking about the Fort Lauderdale area. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris.
And I'm meteorologist Nick Walker. We are tracking the very latest with Hurricane Irma. And here's the latest on what we know right now. Florida Governor Scott has activated all 7,000 members of the Florida National Guard. There are mandatory evacuations beginning at 7 p.m. this evening for the Florida Keys residents. And South Carolina governor is declaring a state of emergency ahead of Irma there. The Atlanta Motor Speedway is open for free camping for storm evacuees heading up to the Atlanta area.
For the latest on this storm, I want to head over to our expert, Dr. Erica Navarro. And we were talking in the break there, Erica, about a little bit of a northerly shift. What's going on with Irma?
Yeah, Jackie, judging from some of the latest imagery that we're getting on the satellites, over the last couple hours, we're seeing a bit of a trend just a bit to the north here with the center of Irma. That would certainly be good news for Puerto Rico because that would keep some of the strongest winds offshore. Impacts are still imminent regardless for the island, but again, that northward shift is absolutely what we would like to see. And so we can zoom in right here on the visible satellite imagery, and I can show you what I'm talking about with the center of that storm. My computer second here doesn't want to agree with me on this, but we are seeing essentially just the first signs of what we again likely to see. Here we go. Now we're looking at the visible satellite imagery, so essentially just the cloud cover of that storm. Watch here at the end of this loop. Here's the center, and it just starts to slide a little bit to the north, right here over the British Virgin Islands right now. That is certainly a good sign for the impacts down the road, but right now there are very strong winds moving into St. John and St. Thomas because they are likely going to be taking on the western side of this storm and the eye wall in the next few minutes. So this extreme wind warning shows you we have Category 3 or higher winds in this area right now. Right here, look at Roadtown and Virgin Gorda right square in the center of the eye. So again, just an incredible radar image that we're looking at right now. But there's the center of Irma battering its way off to the west, and it will be bringing impacts to Puerto Rico this afternoon and through this evening. Taking a look at the rainfall that we can expect here throughout the Caribbean, many of the places in Puerto Rico are likely to see some heavy rainfall. We could be talking up to 15 inches of rain in isolated areas. It might be more like 5 to 8 in the majority, but again, locally these amounts could be higher. Off towards the Dominican Republic and Haiti, we're also expecting to see some heavy rainfall, but if that storm continues to slide further off to the north, that's going to lessen the impacts there for you on the island of Hispaniola. However, as we move forward in time, this storm will be approaching the Bahamas, which is going to
click the button to get started.
Devastating impacts there to those islands. But looking at the wind field right now, this is what is important for the time being. We have an area about 60 to 70 miles wide of hurricane force winds. That is the most concerning as we're heading out to Puerto Rico. But notice that field, that
superior HD picture and sound and the fastest internet starting speeds for the price. Plus, Spectrum Voice lets you talk all you want with unlimited nationwide calling. Spectrum TV, internet, and voice. $29.99 per month each.
175 miles per hour from the center. So we will be seeing impacts regardless. And for a place like San Juan, the rainfall will be about 3 to 5 inches, and storm surge along the coast could be up to 5 feet. Jackie?
That's such an important point, is that even if down the line Florida doesn't get a direct hit from Irma, that size of that storm, we really think the impact could be great. So here's a live look for you in Miami, where the city is planning for its first major evacuation in 12 years. Schools are going to be closed in Miami-Dade County for Thursday and Friday to help families prepare and get ready. And something to keep in mind too, by the way, Miami, your heat index right now is 101 degrees. So that is brutal for people who are trying to hurry up and maybe put boards on top of their homes and businesses today. Here's a look at the latest satellite imagery, and notice still a long jog of it before this heads to Florida. So we do have lots of time to prepare for this, but very little in the way down the line to weaken this storm much. Now, based on the latest path, we do think that the worst of the waves and the water impacts could stay just up towards the north of Puerto Rico, but we do think with the onshore winds, you're still going to see some surge around 4 to 6 feet or so. Heading towards the Bahamas as we move through your Friday, and then by Friday evening, again, even if it doesn't make a direct hit, we do think large waves are going to be hitting into the Keys as well as into southern Florida. So time to prepare is certainly now. Here's a look at the onset of tropical storm force winds. Notice it will be moving through Puerto Rico and exiting the region by late tonight and into tomorrow, and then heading towards South Florida and feeling those impacts as early as Friday evening.
Walls are the best protection And in a how hurricane. to survive this force of the storm. Some people say that having concrete block walls are the best protection in a hurricane. Our senior hurricane specialist Brian Norcross shows us if this is true
materials
or
used
not.
to build your home and the way it's constructed determines if it can stand up to hurricane winds. The materials used to build your home and the way it's constructed determine if it'll stand up to hurricane force winds. So it's important to know what kind of bones make up the skeleton of your house. Some things that seem like they would keep you safe, like concrete, can be deceptive. So the question is my home safe during a hurricane if it's built with concrete blocks? Check that out. We're going to shoot a 2x4. Now, you'd think you'd be safe in a concrete block home in a hurricane, but we're going to check that out. We're going to shoot a 2x4 at a non-reinforced concrete block wall and see how it stands up. Ready for the concrete block test?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, we have 8-inch non-reinforced concrete blocks. The 2x4 penetrated the outer face of the concrete block. Well, we have 8-inch non-reinforced concrete block. The 2x4 penetrated the outer face of the concrete block and only stopped when it hit the interface of the concrete block.
So the lesson here is that flying debris in a hurricane can go through concrete blocks. This 2x4 is moving at 34 miles per hour. In an extreme hurricane, debris might be moving faster than that. So you can't have a false sense of security. Just because you're in a concrete block home does not mean that debris can't go all the way through. So the bottom line is you need to stay away from the exterior walls during the peak of the storm. So what do you do if you have concrete walls? Well, you're best off if the concrete walls are reinforced with steel. During a storm, stay away from exterior walls just in case. And before a storm hits,
all good things to remember, particularly when we're talking about the destructive power of a Category 5 hurricane. All good things to remember, particularly when we're talking about the destructive power of a Category 5 hurricane. Let's talk about the Saffir-Simpson hurricane windscale. This is the Categories 1 to 5. A Category 1 being 74 to 95 mile per hour winds. A Category 2, 96 to 110. A Category 5 is 157 miles per hour and more, and we certainly have more than that. Category 5 is the very top of the scale, and that is where we are right now. We are looking at 185 mile per hour winds. So much more powerful than a Hurricane 1. As a matter of fact, Category 5 that we are looking at a hurricane that is so much more powerful than a Hurricane 1. As a matter of fact, a Category 5 is exponentially higher by 500 times. A Category 5 hurricane, many frame homes will be destroyed. Power outages will probably last for weeks. Most of the area uninhabited for weeks to months, and even a Category 4, which Florida could get, is going to mean massive power outages for some time to come. Please take Irma seriously.